I never thought I'd land a job at the Grammy Awards. As a stagehand, I was used to working long hours in the shadows, ensuring the magic happened without anyone noticing. But this was the pinnacle, an event where legends were made, where history unfolded in real time. I should have been excited, and I was. At first, the moment I stepped backstage, something felt wrong. It wasn't the usual pre-show chaos. The frantic calls through headsets, the last-minute adjustments to lighting, sound, and stage placements. No, it was something else, something I couldn't quite name. A coldness that didn't belong. A weight in the air that made my breath come a little shorter, my pulse a little faster. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. I wasn't the only new guy on the crew. A few of us stood near the rigging area, waiting for assignments, exchanging small talk to ease the tension. Then came the whispers. "Did you hear?" One of the older hands murmured. "People been seeing something back here. Late at night." "Something?" I echoed, half listening as I adjusted my earpiece. He glanced around, lowering his voice. A woman, pale as death, dresses like she's from another era, just stands there, staring at the stage. I forced a chuckle. Every venue's got its ghost stories. He didn't smile. "Maybe, but this ain't just a story." I dismissed it, eager to focus on my job. But later that night, while adjusting a monitor near the stage wings, I saw something that made my skin crawl. A flicker. Just a shadow at first, like someone standing behind me. I turned sharply, but no one was there. I told myself it was just the reflection of one of the crew moving nearby. That's what I wanted to believe. Then the first accident happened. It was past midnight, and most of the crew had wrapped up for the night. A few of us stayed back to double-check the lighting rigging. I was standing near the main stage, wiping sweat from my forehead, when the structure above gave a loud creak. I barely had time to react before the massive lighting rig came crashing down. $100,000 worth of equipment, twisted metal and shattered bulbs, lay in ruins. By some miracle, no one had been directly under it. But it hadn't just fallen. It had been secured moments before. The bolts were tight. It shouldn't have moved at all. Yet, when we checked, one of the safety locks had been unlatched. No one admitted to touching it. No one should have touched it. That was the moment the coldness seemed to deepen, like the air itself was holding its breath. And then, the voices began. At first, they were faint. Just a whisper carried through the stage speakers during sound tests. A glitch, the tech said. A radio signal interference. But it kept happening. Soft murmurs, incomprehensible, yet urgent, seeping through the empty stage. As if someone unseen was trying to speak. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But when I heard my own name whispered from a speaker that wasn't even powered on, I stopped pretending it was nothing. I wasn't the only one. By the end of the second night, more crew members had stories. Some swore they saw a woman standing in the shadows near the curtains, watching the rehearsals. Others heard the same whispers, low and pleading, through their headsets. A few refused to work alone anymore. We were professionals. We knew how to handle high-stress environments. But this wasn't normal. This wasn't just stress. Something was behind the scenes with us, moving unseen, watching, and waiting. The rumors spread like wildfire. At first, it was just the usual backstage talk. Crew members exchanging spooky stories to pass the time between setups. But then it became real. One of the sound techs, a guy named Daniel, went missing. It started with a message in our crew's group chat. Nothing dramatic, no warning signs, just a simple text. "Something's wrong here. We need to talk." That was at 11:47 p.m. I remember because I saw the notification while coiling some cables near the sound booth. I meant to reply. I really did. But I was tired, my shift was almost over, and I figured whatever Daniel wanted to talk about could wait until morning. Morning never came for Daniel. When he didn't show up for his shift, people started asking around. At first, no one was too concerned. Maybe he overslept. Maybe he'd gone out drinking and was nursing a brutal hangover. But as the hours passed, the jokes faded. Calls went straight to voicemail. Texts were left on read, untouched. He wasn't at his hotel. His roommate hadn't seen him. His car was still in the parking lot. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. That night, I stayed later than usual, partly because I was uneasy in partly because I wanted to check something. There was a section backstage near the old storage rooms where people claimed to have seen something. A figure. A woman. The security guards had dismissed it. Tricks of the light, they said. Shadows. But I had been working behind the scenes long enough to know that not all shadows were tricks. Around midnight, the venue was nearly empty. The only people left were a handful of lighting techs packing up for the night. I wandered toward the stage wings, my footsteps muffled by the thick, worn carpet. The place was eerily silent. No humming of speakers, no chatter over the headsets. And then I heard it, a sound that sent ice crawling up my spine, muffled crying. At first, I thought it was one of the crew, maybe someone breaking down from stress. But as I stepped closer, I realized something was off. The sound wasn't coming from a person. It was layered, distorted, as if playing from an old, damaged tape. Faint, but growing stronger. I followed it. I shouldn't have. As I reached the edge of the darkened corridor behind the main stage, the air grew heavy, thick with something I can only describe as wrong. My skin prickled. My breath came shorter. The temperature dropped, the kind of cold that settles in your bones, that makes your instincts scream at you to run. The crying turned into a whisper. He saw her. He shouldn't have seen her. I froze. The voice was right next to me, yet there was no one there. I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribs. The hallway was empty. No movement. No flicker of retreating footsteps. Just darkness stretching into the unknown. And then, from the farthest end of the corridor, something flickered. Like static on an old television. A figure barely visible standing in the shadows. A woman. Her form pulsed in and out of sight, as if reality couldn't decide whether she belonged. I didn't move. I couldn't move. Then, she tilted her head. A sharp, unnatural movement, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. The whisper came again, right by my ear. He's gone. You're next. I don't remember running, but I must have. 1 second, I was frozen. The next, I was bursting through the main backstage area, gasping for air. A couple of stagehands gave me weird looks, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. What was I supposed to say? That I saw something that wasn't there? That a voice had whispered into my ear, breathless and cold? The next morning, security did a full sweep of the venue. No Daniel. No footprints. No signs of forced entry or exit. Nothing. Just a single headset lying abandoned near the mixing board. The mic was fried, as if struck by a sudden power surge. That was when people really started to panic. It wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a coincidence. Something had taken him, and I was starting to believe I was next. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that whisper. He saw her. He shouldn't have seen her. I spent hours scouring the internet, looking for anything about the venue's history, any clue as to what was happening. And then, buried deep in an old music forum, I found something. A name. Eva Sinclair, a rising star in the late 90s. She had been scheduled to perform at the Grammys, on this very stage. But something had gone wrong. Her performance had never aired. No official records of her existed past that night. No interviews. No follow-ups. It was as if she had been erased. Or maybe she had never left. The Grammy organizers wanted everything under control. No police. No press. They downplayed Daniel's disappearance, telling the crew that he had likely skipped town. But those of us who had been backstage that night, those who had heard the whispers, who had seen the flickering shadows, knew better. And then the accidents escalated. The first incident happened during a sound check. The speakers let out an ear-splitting screech, followed by what sounded like a voice. Garbled, distorted, but unmistakably human. The sound engineers scrambled to fix it, but the noise didn't stop until someone yanked the power cord from the console. What the hell was that? One of the producers demanded. No one had an answer. The next day, a camera crew setting up for rehearsal noticed something wrong with their feed. The footage was warping, flickering, as if something was interfering with the signal. The distortion only appeared in one area, directly in front of the main stage. But the worst part? The silhouette. A vague, feminine figure standing in the middle of the stage, visible only on the monitors. The moment someone turned their camera toward the actual stage, The space was empty. But in the footage, she was still there, watching. By the third day, people started quitting. A lighting technician walked out after nearly being electrocuted when a rigging wire snapped loose and whipped past his face. A makeup artist refused to return after hearing a voice whisper her name through a dead microphone. No one wanted to admit it, but we all knew. Whatever had taken Daniel hadn't left. I became obsessed. I needed answers. Something was happening in this venue. Something that had been happening for years. If I was going to understand it, I had to start at the beginning. I spent hours scouring online archives, flipping through old event schedules trying to find a clue. That's when I came across a name I had never heard before. Eva Sinclair, an up-and-coming artist in the late 90s. She had been scheduled to perform at the Grammys in 1998, but something had gone terribly wrong. Her performance never aired. No official explanation. No follow-ups. In fact, it was as if she had been erased. No albums, no interviews, no further mentions in the music industry. Just one night, one scheduled performance, and then nothing. Every official record from that night was gone. But I wasn't ready to give up. If the internet had nothing, I needed to look somewhere older. The Grammy archives were kept in a locked storage room deep inside the venue. After a little persuasion and a promise to keep quiet, I managed to convince an older crew member to let me in. Most of the recordings were digital, stored neatly in labeled hard drives. But tucked away in a forgotten corner, covered in dust, was a box of old VHS tapes. And there, buried beneath a pile of miscellaneous footage, was a tape with a single word written on it in faded ink. Sinclair. I barely breathed as I fed the tape into an old player. The screen crackled with static before stabilizing. The footage was grainy, low resolution, but I could make out the stage, the flashing lights, the roaring crowd. Eva stood in the center. She was beautiful, a haunting presence, with dark curls cascading over her shoulders and a piercing gaze that seemed to look straight through the camera. She held a microphone in one hand, the other stretched outward as if reaching for something unseen. And then something changed. The air around her shimmered, like heat waves rising from asphalt. The audience's excitement turned to unease. People shifted uncomfortably. Some of them were staring at something behind her. But there was nothing there, and then she screamed. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard. Distorted, raw, as if she were being dragged into the void. The camera jerked violently, catching only glimpses of her. Her mouth stretched open in horror, her arms flailing. And then a shadow. It wasn't cast by the stage lights. It wasn't from any person. It rose behind her, growing taller, darker, devouring her. And just like that, the tape cut to black. I sat there, frozen, my heart slamming against my ribs. Eva Sinclair hadn't just disappeared from the music industry. She had vanished, right in front of a live audience. And something had taken her. I rewound the tape, scanning the footage again, this time focusing on the credits at the end. There were no names listed. No acknowledgements. Just the title. Grammy Awards 1998. Unreleased performance. But there was one thing. One tiny detail that sent a bolt of cold fear through my body. At the bottom of the screen, barely legible, was a time code. A timestamp. It was the same date that Daniel had been researching before he disappeared. Daniel had seen this tape, and now he was gone. My hands shook as I ejected the VHS, gripping it tightly as I stared at the dark screen. I wasn't dealing with a simple ghost story. This was something else, something far worse. And if I wasn't careful, I would be next. The night before the Grammys, I barely slept. After what I had seen on the VHS tape, I knew I was in too deep. Daniel had uncovered the same mystery, and now he was gone. Would I be next? Every noise made me jump. Every shadow felt like it was stretching toward me. Then, just past midnight, I heard it. A melody. Faint, drifting through the empty hallways of the venue. Soft and sorrowful, weaving through the dark. It was beautiful, achingly beautiful. But something about it made my blood run cold. I should have ignored it. I should have walked the other way. Instead, I followed the sound. The corridors were empty, but the melody grew louder. It led me through the backstage area, past the rigging, the soundboards, the darkened dressing rooms. And then I saw her. She was standing on the main stage, barefoot. Her dress was tattered, the fabric torn as if it had been caught in something and violently pulled. Her long, dark hair obscured most of her face, but I could see her lips moving, whispering the melody as if the song had never left her. I knew who she was before she even spoke. Eva Sinclair, the woman who had vanished in 1998. I should have run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get away, to bolt for the nearest exit and never look back. But I couldn't move. Her presence was magnetic, unnatural. The air around her pulsed, shimmering with an electric charge. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward me, and I heard her voice, soft, breathless, fractured like a broken record playing at half speed. They never let me finish. The lights above flickered violently. The air became thick, suffocating. The stage beneath her feet groaned, the wood splitting with unseen pressure. I stumbled back, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. And then, all at once, everything snapped. The speakers exploded with static, a piercing shriek cutting through the venue. The stage lights swung wildly, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The floor beneath me trembled as if the entire stadium was shaking. And in the chaos, I saw her smile. Not a kind smile, not a human one, a hungry one. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was outside the venue, gulping in the cold night air. My hands were shaking, my pulse erratic. No one believed me. The security guards chalked it up to exhaustion. Go home, they said. Get some sleep. But I couldn't sleep. Not after that. And the next morning, my fears were confirmed. Another crew member was gone. His name was Luis, one of the camera operators. He had been on set late, making last-minute adjustments to the feed. His colleague said he'd stepped away for just a moment. He never came back. All that remained was his headset, lying abandoned near the main stage. The mic was fried, just like Daniel's. The team played back the last recording on Luis's headset, hoping for some clue. The audio was mostly static, broken up by the occasional shuffle of movement. Then, at the very end, something came through. A whisper. Sing it for me. I felt sick. Eva wasn't just a ghost. She was still looking for something. For someone. And now she had found me. The Grammy Awards proceeded as planned. Despite the disappearances, despite the accidents, despite the whispers that had turned into something far more sinister. No police investigation. No public statements. The show was too big to stop. Too much money on the line. Millions of viewers around the world, waiting for a spectacle. So we carried on, pretending that nothing was wrong. I kept my head down, focused on my tasks. But my hands trembled with every cable I plugged in, every sound check I ran. Because I knew. Eva Sinclair was still here, waiting. Everything ran smoothly for a while. Performers took the stage, the cameras rolled, the audience cheered. The ghosts of the past remained unseen. Then, exactly 1 hour into the live broadcast, the lights flickered. Not just in the venue. On every television screen across the country. The cameras glitched, the sound warped, and for exactly 7 seconds, the world saw something they were never supposed to see. A black and white image. A woman, standing alone on stage, mouth open in an unfinished song. The microphone in her hand was old, outdated by decades. Her dress, torn and faded. Her expression, desperate, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. I knew who she was before the feed cut back to normal. Eva Sinclair. I stared at the monitors in horror. The control room buzzed with confusion. Engineers scrambled to find the source of the glitch. But there was nothing. No file. No interference. No reason that image should have played. The audience at home? They laughed it off. Social media exploded with theories. Some called it an intentional artistic statement. Others claimed it was an eerie marketing stunt for a new artist. But the crew knew better. I knew better. Eva had finally gotten her moment, and it wasn't over. The rest of the broadcast continued without interruption. No more flickering lights. No more whispers through the speakers. Eva had gotten what she wanted. When the show ended, the higher-ups moved fast. The footage was erased. Official explanations were released. A minor technical issue. A brief disruption in the signal. No one in the industry wanted to talk about it. They were afraid. The next morning, I searched for Daniel's name in the news. Nothing. No missing persons report. No statement from his family. It was like he had never existed. I packed my things and left. I left the industry. I left the city. I left everything behind. Some things aren't worth chasing. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. But Eva wasn't finished with me yet. Months later, I was driving down an empty road late at night when the radio crackled. A song came on. It was new. A pop hit, modern and polished. But I recognized it instantly. That melody. The same one I had heard humming in the dark backstage. The same one I had followed to the stage. The same one that ended Eva Sinclair's career before it had even begun. I looked at the screen on my dashboard. Artist, Eva Sinclair. I nearly slammed on the brakes. The industry had finally let her perform. And this time, she wasn't going anywhere. Thanks for watching. If you like the story, click like, subscribe to the channel, and write an idea for the next story in the comments.